Hey, John.
Matt, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How are
Good.
you?
I'm good. So everyone, we're live. This is Gadget Lab's first Google Plus Hangout, and we're here this morning on the West Coast to talk about Matt Honan's epic hacking. On August 3rd, Matt, your Apple ID was hacked. A couple of hackers teamed together, and through social engineering, were able to convince Apple and Amazon tech support to provide the right information that would ultimately allow them to get into all your cloud accounts, which were sort of daisy chained together. So I don't think we need to go into all the details of what happened. We've covered it on Wired, and Matt, you had your own video that's posted on Wired as well. So today we're going to share some audience questions that were sent ahead of time, and I'm just going to fire them at you, Matt.
Great.
And these are questions. These address topics that maybe we haven't delved into too deeply in existing coverage. So the first one came from a comment to an article, an invitation article we posted, and this one is from Jubilee BZ, and the person's question is, what is your opinion of cloud safety now that someone was able to remotely wipe your personal laptop?
I really think now that if for accounts that are storing our personal information, our personal data, especially stuff that's very secure or that's very private, like email, it's almost irresponsible of companies who are doing that to not have security mechanisms that at least have some form of double two-factor authentication, like Google's or Facebook's, where you've got something like a password, and maybe something you own, like a phone. I know a lot of stuff is there's already a movement towards biometrics. There's already movement towards using things like key fobs that you have to have that will communicate with you. But basically, my opinion of cloud security is that if it's just a single password, it's broken.
So from a big meta perspective, does the cloud give you pause now? Because a lot of pundits out there are sort of indicting the cloud as a singular technology, and that in general there's almost advice that if you really want to be careful, you have to store locally, and the cloud is bad.
I mean, so I agree with one part of that. I agree that, like, if you really want to be careful, and this is someone else asked us about this, you have to store locally. Like, one of the questions we got was, what's
Yeah.
we can get into that, but what my top priority is for securing my stuff, and it's that you need to have a local and online backup. If you've got your data locally, there's no way. I mean, if you got it locally and with a redundant online copy of it, you're in control of it. When the problem is when you're not in control of it. The problem comes up when someone else is in control of it, when a company's in control of it, and they have a bad security policy that you may not even know about. So getting back to kind of your point in a very circuitous manner, I think that that I don't think that it's a problem with the cloud per se. I think there are security problems, and I think that a lot of those security problems are due to basically accounts being susceptible to social engineering, to other weird techniques that people can use to call up and sort of trick tech support into letting you into your account. I don't think that's necessarily a problem with the cloud. It's the same thing people have done, been doing at banks for forever. It's not like social engineering is new.
Right. So perfect segue to a question from this came to our Tumblr, and it's from someone named Matt with two T's. Matt, so how do you think Amazon and Apple should improve the security of their accounts? So they already made some changes in retroactively to close the social engineering security holes that allowed the hackers to get into your account. But have they gone far enough? And if you were to take two steps ahead, what's the advice to the Amazons and Apples of the world?
So it's interesting. Neither one of those companies will say publicly exactly what they're doing. Amazon says that it's closed the particular exploit that allowed someone to get into my account, which is adding a credit card number, a bogus credit card number, then to an account, and then via the phone, then calling back and giving that credit card number to get a password reset. And Apple has put a temporary hold on issuing password resets over the phone. We don't know for how long, and we don't know what their new policies are going to be. But I think that any policy that you've got is going to be probed extensively by people, by hackers, by social engineers, whatever you want to call them, who are, you put a new policy in place and people are going to try and get around it. That's just a fact, and certainly Apple and Amazon aren't the only companies that have this problem, and we're going to be looking at some more in the next couple of weeks here. But I think that one thing that those companies could do in particular to improve the security of their accounts is set up multiple sort of levels of access. Apple in particular. I don't think that the same password that you use to buy a single off of iTunes or a ringtone, should be the same password that someone can use to wipe your devices remotely. I also think that, especially with the remote wipe and the Find My stuff, which, also has a level of privacy implication if someone's able to get into your account and see where you are based on where your devices are. I think there needs to be another layer of security there that doesn't exist currently. I don't know if that's a second password and another PIN, but certainly it needs more than what it's got right now. I'll be very interested to see what they announce when they fix things.
Yeah, it's pretty clear they're making trade-offs between convenience and security, and so some of the things you're suggesting would add that extra level, but they also know that users don't want to go through the rigmarole of that many more passwords, and that really is where a lot of the tension lies.
Exactly. I think that's the big trade-off. It's security versus ease of use. It's, okay, well, it's a lot more convenient to have your credit cards stored on some web server somewhere, so you don't have to enter it every time. You can just, it's more convenient for you. It's better for the company because you can just hit a button that says buy instead of, going in and having to punch in your 16 digits and your security code and your expiration date every time. But the problem is that, if once that's set up, the onus is on the people who are taking and holding that information to make sure that it's very secure, and that if you're going to offer that ease, you've got to really bring the security as well.
Right. Let's get back to the audience questions. This is also from Tumblr. It's from the handle is Actor. So if you were just to pick one security measure, what is the #1 priority for securing your digital existence? Is it a password? Is it delinking, de-daisy chaining your various cloud accounts?
I'm actually gonna waffle and pick two. But I think that an essential part of security is something that I wasn't doing, which is making regular backups. And so, that's not necessarily a security measure in terms of it keeping people out, but it will keep your data safe if you've got redundant backups. But the #1 security measure, or one of the big security measures that I think is important, is to unlink all these accounts. I had once someone is able to get into my Apple ID account, which was also my email account, my backup email for basically everything, they were able to go everywhere else. They could get into my Google via that. They got into Twitter, and I think it's pretty important to have. And this is something I'd never really thought about before. I think it's pretty important to have some form of private, secure email that's not. That's not linked publicly, that you don't use to communicate with, that's not on your website, that's not, something that people can look up and find easily about you. It shouldn't be your name. It should, you should have it. You should keep that thing secure and don't link it to other. Don't make point A get to point B, get to point C, get to point D.
Right. Somewhat related. So this question is from. Let's see. This is actually was a question in one of our article comment threads. It's from Jaded Fox. Why weren't your reset emails going to a service you control? You own the domain mth.com. Do you have an email set up with that? Sending the emails to that would have prevented social engineering into that mailbox, since you would be the admin.
The simple answer is I don't have email set up with that domain. I have run a mail server in the past with a different domain, and I just wasn't doing it. It's not that much of a hassle, but it is a little bit of a hassle, and a little bit of a hassle. A lot of the stuff that happened to me was preventable because I wasn't willing to do these little hassles, like backing up, like enabling two-factor authentication. Things that I should have done, setting up a mail server is not something most people are going to do. You know, they're not. I mean, while I wish that I had done that, and he's absolutely right, it would have, you know, it would have prevented all this stuff from happening, or could have. You know, I just don't think that's a realistic thing that most people are going to do. And to me, like, the thing about what happened that's interesting to me is not what happened to me personally. It's that, you know, these systems were in place that created this, you know, that made this possibility of a failure. You know, I think going back to that security versus ease of use, you know, if things aren't easy, people won't do them, you know, and
right.
That's that statement.
Right. So the challenge becomes, how do we convince people to do them? How do we convince them that the security measure, that extra bit of inconvenience you take today, will pay off dividends tomorrow? And this topic is expressed in a tangential way from a comment from Sally J. And so it's sort of a trippy question, but bear with me. If you could call yourself with a magical time machine phone with a limit of 30 seconds or maybe just a minute to talk, how would you convince yourself to make backup copies of the photos and store them somewhere offline? So what's that dialogue that you have with your reluctant friend or your wife to convince them that they have to be more secure?
For me, I mean, I think you know, what happened to me obviously was pretty crazy, but, you know, I could have lost all those photos in another way. I was at Drive Savers, and the way getting my drive worked on, and they were recovering my data. And the way most people lose data is via a hard drive crash or some sort of, you know, most people aren't losing data from a hack. They're losing data from a hard drive crash or from, you know, some sort of damage to the machine itself. And if I was going to make that phone call, I would say, you need to think about having all these pictures on your machine that you don't have backups of anywhere else, and what happens if you spill your cup of coffee on it in the morning. You know, because that, you know, if I'd done that, I would have lost the pictures. And, you know, that's something I guess I certainly was aware of, but I just hadn't considered it as a real possibility. And you know, the not having a backup was such a bad idea. There's so many ways it could go wrong. But like, just if you can kind of drive home that point of like, what happens if you spill coffee on your keyboard? I think that's something that a lot of people can relate to. Right.
So you and I are tech journalists, and a lot of our friends are tech journalists. How many people in your network, which is extensive, you're very connected, and they're tech-savvy people. How many people do you think have actually changed their own personal policies, who've made backups, who've created different passwords for all their accounts, all the smart things we're supposed to do? Has your experience spurred change among your friends?
I mean, so one thing's been very encouraging to me is I've seen person after person after person that I know or that I don't know online, in person, telling me, you know, I set up a backup system. I turned on two-factor authentication on Gmail and Facebook. I've taken these security measures that you said that you should have taken before this happened. And that's awesome. But I think there's you know, and I've done those things, but I think the problem is, like, you have to keep doing them, you know, and that's what I hope people do, is that you know, in 30 days when you have to get that, you know, text message to your phone again from Google to keep the two-factor going and log in again, I hope people don't just turn it off. You know, I hope that, like, when someone has to sit there and wait for, you know, half an hour or more while their system backs up, that they don't just get frustrated and say, you know what, I'll do this later. Because it's sort of like, you know, I don't know if you've ever had someone close to you have a health problem, like a heart attack or you know, something like that, where it gets your attention, and you say, I'm not going to let that happen to me. I'm going to go out and I'm going to run, and I'm going to get in shape. And you go out and you run for a week, and then you don't do it anymore. It's not just starting these habits; it's maintaining them that's important.
That's the real challenge. Okay, this question's from Twitter. Well, there's sort of two questions. The handle Reliability asks, do you still love Apple? And then I'll just add in another question from a different reader. Going forward, will you put as much faith in Apple? The experience, the person is saying, writing, the experience has left me questioning whether it's smart to have everything I own be Apple related. So was your hack sort of an Apple ecosystem hack?
I mean, certainly the device wipes were an Apple ecosystem hack. As to whether or not I still love Apple, I mean, I would say that I've never loved Apple. You know, certainly not the company. I think Apple makes great products. They make really fantastic, high quality, well-designed products with typically very good user interfaces. And one of the things they always focus on is making things easy. And I'm very disappointed in Apple that they made getting password resets as easy as they did. Maybe that was done, you know, to sort of like make it easy for their users who had a problem, but it was too easy. And wiping certainly remotely wiping devices like computers is too easy right now. So I'm very disappointed in Apple, and I'm very you know, I'm very shocked that these systems weren't better thought out before they're put out there in the wild. I certainly have come across many other people who've had their devices wiped by someone else, by a malicious individual. Interestingly, it's been in cases of divorce sometimes, when, you know, your ex has gone in and you know, to get revenge, kind of wiped your stuff. Going forward, will I put as much faith in Apple? Absolutely not. No, I will not. And you know, I got to say, I'm really looking forward to Windows Phone 8 and Windows 8, and I'm still going to use what I consider to be the best solution for me at all times. Whether that's, you know, it's not like I'm going to hold a grudge and be like, oh, I'm never using your stuff again. But you know, if that's Apple, if that's Windows, if that's, you know, a Chromebook at some point in time, I mean, I'm going to use whatever I think works best.
Great. Okay, so final question. Did you ask the hackers how many other people they had done this to, and whether they thought about the impact on other people?
I've asked both of these questions. Until very recently, I'd only been in touch with one of the two. I got the other one kind of popped up day before yesterday on Twitter, and I confirmed with the first guy that this was the second one, and I haven't been in as much touch with him. The second part of that question, if I asked them if they thought about the impact, I have, and their answer was basically no, they haven't. And as to the first part, how many other people they've done this to, I haven't ever really been able to get a straight answer on that, or what I would consider a straight answer on that. You know, I mean, it's not something that I've found Phobia particularly willing, who was one of the guys, particularly willing to talk about. You know, I certainly think that he feels a lot of remorse for what happened in my personal situation. Whether or not he's done this before, I mean, it would be hard for me to imagine that he hadn't, you know, gotten into an Apple ID before, given the level of knowledge he had about it. But you know, he hasn't directly admitted that to me.
Right. One of the things that sort of caught my attention as you've been covering it, and I've been working with you on the coverage, is that there's a lot of data out there, and I'll use this term broadly, best practices about social engineering. And so people are looking into the tech support systems of large companies, and they're figuring out where the security holes are and how they could socially engineer a tech support person. And there's different holes for every company. And so as you and I have talked about your hack, I think we're both learning a lot about this underground, if you will. And it's really interesting from a tech perspective, but also it's a wake-up call that this happens.
Yeah, I mean, I hope that, you know, I mean, I specifically called out Apple and Amazon in the story I wrote, but it's clear that this is a far bigger problem than Apple and Amazon, you know, and I really hope that, you know, I don't know, the other large companies who are retailers or who are, you know, email providers are looking into their practices as well.
Right. Hey, Matt, thanks so much.
Thanks,
and this was Gadget Lab's first Google Plus Hangout. There will be more. And next time we post a story asking for comments, please join in. Thanks a lot for coming.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.